listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God! Give away.
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joined today with Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we're discussing the Sentinel, the movie from 1977. Currently, you can watch it via Netflix if you would like to, and it's also available in all kinds of disc formats. But it's a movie that Derek initially talked about a bunch, and then he's not able to be on this episode because of some stuff that came up. But it's a movie that I had heard about and hadn't really watched. And then I watched it, and I was like, oh, shit, there's like a bunch of people in this I didn't realize, because it's got Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. It's got the Penguin from the Batman 1960s live-action series.
Burgess.
It's got the vampire from Fright Night. I'm forgetting the character's name.
Yeah. And then it's got from the Vacation films.
Yeah, it's got
Beverly D'Angelo.
from it's got the mom from the Vacation films. So of course
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, so it's Jeff Goldblum, Chris Sarandon, Burgess Meredith, Beverly D'Angelo.
And apparently the director wanted Martin Sheen to play the lead.
Yeah.
But they said he was a TV name, so they didn't.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. So
not the lead, but I guess the
Yeah.
boyfriend, you know.
Yeah, so that's a movie we'll talk about here in a little bit. But before that, we go through some things we've been watching briefly. And I guess we can start off with like Ash vs. Evil Dead. So we're both caught up to episode 7, right?
Yeah.
So and there's also been news on the show lately, too, that it's like hit all-time series lows on the ratings per episode. And two, I think that Lionsgate had purchased Starz. So like the ownership of the network changed like over the past year. So some people are saying that was a sign that a lot of their shows, because was it the other show, American Gods, that had gotten some critical praise?
Yeah, I watched a little bit of that.
Like the showrunners of that, Brian Fuller, and other, like they left because of, I guess, like discussions or arguments over budget or direction of the show. And then after they left, like Gillian Anderson left. So it seems like they've had some turnover at their bigger budgeted show properties. And Ash vs. Evil Dead, I've seen a lot of like, of course, it's like fodder for the horror sites to be like, is this show nearing cancellation? Are they going to kill Ash?
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, if the people behind the show had a good inkling that it was likely to be their last season, if they would have written a more definitive season finale, or
Like where he sacrifices himself or something. You know, they could do something like that.
I mean, and two, like,
And he could always come back, because this series is king of people getting killed and coming back to life.
yeah, because the show can easily retcon like situations, but like we'll have to see what happens with these last few episodes. But you know, overall, the show itself, like season 3 to me hasn't been a huge dip in quality or anything.
No, not at all.
I mean, some people like, and of course in comment sections on internet articles are like, it's terrible. But I think overall problem is just they shifted it from a fall time frame to a, you know, early spring, late winter time frame, and didn't really put much advertising behind it, and didn't have like the same level of spotlight on the people involved with the show. Because like when season 1 came out,
There was a big press push. And
Bruce
everything,
Campbell and Lucy Lawless were on Late Night with Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
And there was just more push for it. But I think releasing it, you know, February was probably like a weird time frame for that show. If anything, summer makes more sense. But they don't want to sit on it for essentially an entire year. Because last year they pushed it from the October fall time frame because they didn't want to go up against The Walking Dead and all those shows. But honestly, I think it does better in that time frame because people are looking for that content. And two, like, I don't know if the timing, it used to, like, on the Starz On Demand app, I would watch all the episodes on Friday nights because they usually let them go early. I don't think they've done that this year.
So we're recording this Sunday morning, so that's why we haven't watched
April 15th.
Yeah, well, we haven't watched episode 8 yet. But I looked on the app, I think yesterday morning, on Saturday morning, and it was not on there. Because I was actually wanting to just watch it early because I really liked episode 7. I think I've been really enjoying this season. at the beginning of it, I was talking about like, I wish they would almost just forget trying to have like a through line story because sometimes that isn't like super strong. It's fine. But actually, I felt like it's surprisingly pretty strong this episode. Like if anything, the through line story this season is probably maybe the strongest. I'm not saying like this is like has my favorite episodes, but as far as the larger story arc, I feel like, okay, it's doing something. Like last season, we got him and his dad, and that was good too, though. And then the daughter, I thought, that could go either way. But with the way 7 has ended up, like I really enjoyed, like it was a cool, like, okay, I like that they brought that character in now. You know what I mean? And what they've done with her and everything. So I see why they brought her in, and they've used her, I think, enough to justify her. And she's not just like, oh, Ash has a daughter, and then you never see her or something like that.
Well, I do think that like a somewhat valid criticism is the overall big bads have been the same kind of from season to season. So they're not really treading, breaking any new ground in terms of who the ultimate villain or who's directing the ultimate negative, villainous side is.
I mean, but also I love Lucy Lawless. So I'm glad she's in it all. But also in season 2, she kind of was almost on their side, right?
It was more of just like the enemy of his enemy was her enemy.
Yeah, which I really loved,
So they've done like, because like the second season had like, she was still involved in it, but then it had like the kind of like additional character.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see like what they're doing season to season. Like based on the chatter, like it doesn't sound super likely. Because Bruce Campbell had said, like, if the show doesn't continue, there wouldn't be any movie. Because if they don't have the interest to keep the show going, people aren't going to show up to a movie. And if the show doesn't sound like it's, pulling in very good numbers, because the ratings for, like, Stars aren't great. They're not, pulling in 10 million viewers. For Stars, like, 1 million viewers would be, like, their top-rated show.
Yeah, well, and 15 years ago, Stars was, like, you would probably get HBO, Showtime, and then in my mind, then comes Cinemax and Stars.
Yeah.
Now, aside from those, you have all the streaming platforms.
Yeah.
And it's like they are probably 10th tier, in the 15th, bottom 15, like of what your priority of getting a streaming service is, like, after Hulu and all that stuff.
Name recognition now, you have, Netflix, HBO, Amazon Prime has the series, but I don't think they've gotten the viewership for them that the others have. They had some prestige shows that won awards, but nothing that was like can't miss shows. I mean, they have the Grand Tour, which was like the host from Top Gear, so I'm assuming that does well globally, but they paid a lot of money for it too.
And if you want horror content, there's Shudder. You know what I mean? They even have exclusive stuff now. They've got exclusive TV shows.
And then you think about, before you think of Stars, you think of AMC because it has like The Walking Dead and shows like that. Then you probably think of FX too, because it has a lot of big name shows like Legion and Atlanta and other.
Yeah, I just
the Americans
with the the push for original content. I wonder what Lionsgate's plan will be, because just to have a movie service with a service with films on it that has nothing original, those are a dime a dozen, and there's many free ones on stream. You know what I mean? Like, granted, different services have different movies, but also you can buy the movie digitally or rent it for a few bucks. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and something too, like Stars, they don't have a ton of original series. They've just had a handful over the years, and it is just interesting, like the landscape now, because like Twin Peaks: The Return went to Showtime, and you wouldn't initially think of Showtime as like a huge player, but they do have shows that people are really into, and they do have,
Ray Donovan.
Then they've had over the years like Dexter and what's the other show?
Claire Danes, or was it Claire Danes?
Yeah, I'm forgetting the name of the show now, but that show
set in the Middle East, maybe, I don't know, military type show. I don't know the name of it.
I'm trying to remember what it is. It's gonna drive me crazy. Homeland.
Yeah, Homeland.
So they had that show. So they've had different shows, but like Stars is kind of down the the rungs of the ladder. And then them not putting really a huge promotional push and releasing a horror-themed show at this point in the year just seems like the wrong move. Because even like American Horror Story gets released in like September.
Yeah. It's weird. Unfortunately, like I don't think Shudder has the money or the backing to pick up Ash vs. Evil Dead. But it would be very cool if they did, because I mean, Stars put in enough money in this show. I think I think I commend them for not going super low budget because there's so many practical effects in this show.
Yeah. Because they have digital effects, but they have a lot of practicals too.
Yeah, they absolutely have a lot of practicals. Way more than you would expect from a lot of shows. I know The Walking Dead did a lot originally to kind of almost make that a standard in some ways for horror stuff. But it'd have been very easy just to do some cheap CGI.
Well, like The Walking Dead, because I haven't watched the recent season just because last season I just tapped out because it's like, okay, I'm done watching this. But like they have the practical zombie effects and they have like they have good zombies in the show and good gore from time to time. But then I remember like before it was like an epidemic of people just running up with something and shoving it in a zombie's head and pulling it out and like fake blood squirting and all that. So that just to me ground on me. And Ash vs. Evil Dead, even though there is some CG, it's also mixed in with copious amounts of actual blood being sprayed. And then after every episode, because I'm watching it on the Stars On Demand app, they show like the behind this episode type little like couple minute interview with like Rob Tappert or some different people from the show. And they show like some of the behind, like as they're shooting some of the scenes and set pieces, and they do have a lot of practical effects. And they do have a lot of prosthetics and things on set. Like in this recent season, they said that some of the stuff they were trying to do with like child actors, none of the kids would sit still or kind of go along with any of the prosthetics or any of that. So they just had to do as much as they could in person and then just do the rest digitally because just the kids would not sit there.
Or you erase stuff digitally and kind of fix it. That's like one of my favorite things about that show and even like the HBO shows, mainly Silicon Valley and Barry, which I've been watching this season. But the post-show content, you know what I mean? Like I love the behind the scenes on all those shows and where they get to talk about it and some ideas for stuff. Because it's cool just hearing the creators and their decisions on things. It's more in depth than you would expect. You know what I mean? From something 15, 20 years ago. And I wish Netflix would actually do that on some of their shows. Like that would be awesome to have a feature like, hey, skip this.
Yeah.
If I'm watching Stranger Things, like the Duffer Brothers, I don't even know what those guys look like. I haven't heard, you know what I mean? Like I don't know where their headspace is. Like I would love to see that like as a post credit sequence on a lot of Netflix originals that you can skip if you wanted to,
Yeah, because having because some shows have gone around of like you have like a YouTube channel, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And I'll definitely watch that. But the average person probably isn't going to go from one platform to another to watch the content. But like, to me, like the streaming services, so like even like FX or AMC or whatever, they have like their apps you can stream the shows from. In those apps, like if you could then, as soon as the episode ends, like it went to the behind the episode stuff, that would be a huge incentive to use their app to watch.
Yeah. And it gets you invested in the creators because sometimes some episodes are hit and miss on certain shows. But if you like get to know the creators and you think, okay, I like where their headspace is at or what they're doing, it may not have worked out, but I want to see what they do next week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I really like that. And just like as being somebody who's interested in filmmaking like we are, like it's cool to see the thought processes. And sometimes they might even point out stuff you didn't realize and like not just like effects wise, but like thematically or something, if it went over your head or you just weren't paying attention.
And two, I don't really think I want something in the format because I know like Netflix did Beyond Stranger Things.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
And like AMC had The Talking Dead. And they also had like the after the show discussion thing for the Fear the Walking Dead too, I think. And it's like The Walking Dead itself had enough filler content in the episodes themselves. I then do not want to watch another show that shows people talk about the episode.
Just give me like a 3 to 5 minute vignette on that specific episode that's well cut, tightly put together, and that's it.
Yeah, show an interview with important people to the episode and show some behind the scenes stuff. But Ash vs. Evil Dead.
I care about people like us talking about it.
Yeah. If you want to see more Ash vs. Evil Dead, it sounds like you need to make sure you watch the show legally for the remaining episodes. And, we'll see what happens with the ratings for the show and what'll go on with a possible next season. But if you want it to exist, you make sure you're watching it legally.
I was thumbing through the app, like trying to go down to I don't know if I was looking to make sure. That's what Saturday morning I was going through and making sure I wasn't missing a new episode that was maybe posted. And I was seeing all the thumbnails from season 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, I kind of want to rewatch this series again.
Yeah.
Like there's some really good stuff in season 2. Season 1, I think, is the weakest one, but it also like that pilot episode, and it has some good episodes as well in that season. So
because season 1, like the pilot episode is directed by Sam Raimi. It's the longest episode of the run. I would assume probably their biggest budget in an individual episode. So that was the one that, you know, in and of itself was worth the show coming back.
Yeah.
And then there were some filler episodes in season 1, and then they kind of got the story going in the back half. And then the second season did even more stuff, like going back to the cabin and bringing like bigger set pieces into play.
I think Derek got tired of like, oh, they're just hanging out or whatever, and then going to the next place. I think season 1, maybe some of the issues with some people, or Derek possibly, is like looking at it now, it was important for the show in the long term, but like if you think about those episodes, it feels like the first half of that season was all character building, because like you had one episode, you know, the first pilot, then you had like a whole episode at Kelly's house, then you had a whole one with Pablo and his uncle, you know what I mean, like, and then you had one with Lucy Lawless. Like there was like an episode dedicated, which was good for character building for the long run, because we do have 3 seasons of this now. So
well, I think too, the other thing that may have drawn on him a little bit is too, if people aren't like TV people, I need to stop using the word like, because I've noticed when I edit these, I don't have time to sit there and go like some podcasts do and edit out every filler word, because that just takes way too much time and effort. But I'm trying to mentally cut down on stuff like that. But the episodes being, you know, 20-something minutes plus credits and all that, the episode length, you would just get a bite of a story. So you would be left wanting more. So it might... And then having to wait week to week to get the next installment, it's like not much was being accomplished per episode.
Yeah.
And it would take, if you watch it all and binge watched it, because it's on Netflix now too.
Yeah, which is
season 1 and 2. So if you binge watch it, it all moves quickly. But if you're watching it weekly, then you're just like, they didn't even get very far. And then you have to wait a week to see the story progress more. And then the story really didn't progress all that much until like the last 3 episodes. So I see how that somebody that's not a TV person, because TV does that. I
wonder if in some world Netflix could pick up a season 4. If they thought, oh, this is doing pretty, like if Lionsgate was like, we want to get out of the original content game. Obviously, they don't care about giving their shows over to Netflix, because like HBO, they have a deal with Amazon, but they're not giving away, you know, Curb Your Enthusiasm or any of their old shows to Netflix, like.
Well, yeah, they're letting...
And Starz is like a direct competitor with HBO, you know?
Yeah, like with Netflix, because they have like the first 2 seasons, and I would assume that they had to have some streaming deal. Like, I guess theoretically, if Netflix saw like numbers on their platform that were big enough, they could spring for another season, because they've made some pretty not great things. So we'll just have to see what happens with these last few episodes. But I think the takeaway is, if you want the show to continue on, just watch it legally to contribute to the viewership numbers and see where it goes.
And check it out on Netflix now if you haven't seen it. And if you are kind of like on the first season, which I enjoyed it a lot, because I was so happy it was back now. You know what I mean? And, but even if you are, definitely give that second season a watch too, because I think that one is better than the first. And this third one is not disappointing at all either.
Yep. So that was Ash vs. Evil Dead. So another show that I watched some of was Legion Season 2. So the FX show that has Dan Stevens in it, who was in The Guest, and recently was in Beauty and the Beast as the Beast. So Legion is about David Haller, which is in the comics like Charles Xavier's son, and like complicated backstory and how all those characters work and everything, but essentially just kind of like a B-tier X-Men universe character that came into play during some of the storylines, but wasn't like Wolverine or Professor X or Magneto, like level recognition. And so they took the kind of secondary character and made a show about him, and didn't make it like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., kind of like Marvel Universe light, where you have like this existing universe and you make this kind of offshoot that's obviously lower budget because it's a show versus movies, and
like
it didn't
tangentially connected, but not really.
Yeah, so Legion is stylistically completely different from any of the X-Men films, and it has like characters in it like that have, I don't think have really been mentioned in the movies. So like, does it take place in the same universe as the movie stylistically? I would say it doesn't look like it. Looks like alternate Earth. But there have been allusions to the fact that Professor X is the main character, David's dad. So whether or not they ever explicitly state that is yet to be seen. And if they get, either James McAvoy or Patrick Stewart on the show, I don't know. But it's one of those shows, too, that does the thing. It kind of tells storytelling in kind of convoluted ways. And it's trying to think of like a way to explain it. So what Twin Peaks The Return was to Twin Peaks is kind of what Legion is to the X-Men films. Because it's kind of obscure storytelling and like...
Basically, don't go in and be expecting the same thing.
Yeah. So they have like interpretive dance numbers that are used sometimes to convey things. They have stories that are told out of order sometimes, and a lot, things take place in David's head because he has telekinesis powers and other powers. So there's a lot of things going on, and I could see somebody going in the show that just wants a straightforward, beat, like story A to B to C to D. Type story, getting frustrated with it because it lays out things that's happening and then kind of obscures them from you and takes a while to get to it. So I can see that being frustrating, but the show itself is visually very interesting and has, great actors in it because Aubrey Plaza's done a great job in it. Dan Stevens is good in it. And then it has different people pop up. Jermaine Clement is in it. So it has different people you've seen before doing interesting things. I think that if you watched the first season and didn't really find it to be your jam and didn't like it, season 2 has only turned that around. If anything, it's gone even more in the direction of things people may have liked about season 1. But so far, I'm enjoying it. Because I'm okay with these shows. Like, if you're going to take a known property and adapt it, I'm okay just taking it, making it kind of unrecognizable from other elements. Because otherwise, I don't want a cheap TV version of a sub-character that... is from a bigger property. I wouldn't want to, like, I keep saying like, even though I'm trying not to. But
you don't want it to be a situation where you feel like that they got this character because it was cheap, and then now they're spending as least money as possible on it, and getting something out to try to just, sell some commercials. Like, this is something that came from creators that were inspired to take an idea and really experiment with it.
Yeah, so no offense to anyone that watches like the DC shows that are on the CW. I've only really caught glimpses of them and seen, but what those shows appear to be to me is TV versions of very kind of standard storyline type shows that, obviously lower budget in the movies, and some of them even have characters that are in the movies, and it just feels like CWized, if that's a verb. Whereas Legion is just kind of, it's like the showrunner is Noah Hawley, who had done the Fargo series. So if you saw Fargo, especially like season 2, like it went a little bit out there. It wasn't just like a strict adaptation of the Coen Brothers original movie. It was kind of out there. So this show is even more out there. So I'm enjoying what it's doing, and it's one of those shows I'm going to enjoy watching. It's kind of an acquired taste. But if it's something that somebody watches that and they think it's too out there, I'd love to see their opinion on like Twin Peaks The Return, because it kind of has storytelling. I mean, obviously in Legion, it involves like mutant powers and abilities doing things, and there's that element. So it's not just people sitting around a Roadhouse bar sweeping the floor.
Yeah.
But there are things out there that are obscure.
Or that maybe test your patience.
Yeah, so it's a show that doesn't just lay everything on the table and bring it all together. It does require a little bit of timing and thinking. And I do like shows where you can kind of read up and theorize on what's going to happen based on what's gone on so far, versus shows that are just a very linear, laid out experience. But so far, there's 2 episodes of season 2. I'm enjoying it quite a bit and looking forward to the upcoming episodes. That was Legion season 2. So, Sean, did you watch anything else?
Yeah, I watched a couple films. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Let's see. Is it Michael Haneke? Yeah, it's just Michael, I think.
Yeah.
Who directed Funny Games and then the remake. I was watching some stuff on the Filmstruck Criterion channel, streaming service. So I watched The Seventh Continent, which was his first film.
Yeah.
And I didn't see that it was like horror or anything. But the synopsis is it chronicles 3 years of it was from 1989 too, just to give you an idea of the era. Chronicles 3 years of a middle-class family seemingly caught up in their daily routines, only troubled by minor incidents. Behind their apparent calm and repetitive existence, however, they're actually planning something sinister. So the sinister thing, I was like, okay, there's something dark in this movie if it's not a horror film. And, you know, sometimes straight horror is not scary or disturbing at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like, okay, here's some fodder for people getting killed. And actually, I'm not even sure what... Is he German, maybe? Michael Haneke? I think he may be German. So it is subtitled film.
Yeah.
But I just... Part of me liked it because it just got to watch a film set of a middle-class family in 89. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like cool. Like, and interesting thing, like I have not watched any of his films before. Stylistically, it's maybe not a trademark of his because I did watch Funny Games after this and it wasn't anything that was super similar. There were some shots that were exactly the same, but it's interesting. Like the first part of the film, you are seeing this family's life and at first they're like in a car. And you are seeing tight shots of the radio and then just kind of behind the seat. I think they're going through a car wash. I'm trying not to get it mixed up because Funny Games starts out with people in a car, tight shots of the radio and behind the seats. Like it was literally some of the same exact shots and setup, but which is probably very intentional on his part. But for the first part of the film, you don't even see their faces. You hear the conversations. You'll see a tight shot of a fridge and they open and get something out. Yeah. Maybe a tight shot of, you know, something like a coat hanger or something, getting the coat off. It was framed like lower than the head and like a medium shot on whatever they were doing. It's very interesting because like for maybe, I don't know, it felt like a good portion. It felt like 10 minutes or so. You were just seeing that. And I guess maybe that's supposed to get you in the headspace of maybe putting yourself in their shoes, like, okay, I don't see faces, so I'm just going to identify with this being a life, you know, like I would live or something. It is a very normal family. And I think it takes place, did I say over 3 years? Yeah, 3 years. So it's basically in 3 chapters or 3 parts. And you really don't know exactly what's going on until the third part. But it almost, you know, it just kind of, I don't want to say it meanders, but you are following their kind of mundane life. Yeah. But that's almost the point of it. Like they are people who you know, the father he's middle class, but he like moves up in his company. Like things are not going bad for them. Yeah. But by the end of the film, and you know, bad things happen that the viewer is watching, and it is the way it's presented and just the context of seeing this like normal family throughout this film. And I don't want to say effects, but just seeing some certain things on screen and the use of sound and everything, it is, pretty messed up. Like it's like not a film I'd want to show, you know, a younger kid just because it is like, it could be disturbing to them in a certain way. So I recommend that film. I wouldn't say jump into that one first of his because it is, maybe it tests your patience some, you know, but that was the point of it, I think. Yeah. But I really enjoyed it actually. And again, I just like the era it was shot in. So after that, I watched Funny Games, but this was the original one, shot in 97. And that is, I guess, have you seen any of those, the remake or that one?
No.
Are you familiar with it?
I've heard about it.
I was just barely familiar. So 2 psychotic young men take a mother, father, and son hostage in their vacation cabin and force them to play sadistic games with one another for their own amusement. There's not really a lot of games, you know, it's not really like, it made me think it was like, okay, is this like a home invasion Saw or something, you know? Yeah. And that maybe wasn't super appealing to me ever. So that's why I actually started with The Seventh Continent first, because some of his films are leaving the service soon. So I was like, I'll check this out. And I like that film quite a bit. So it's not that at all. This is not torture porn, which I was afraid it was going to be, you know, just based on the synopsis. Yeah. And that's why I never got around to it. But you know, not to spoil too much, but it's very interesting because, it's almost like Scream in some ways. Yeah. It is meta in some, like those characters, they don't do it a lot. And Scream is like meta, you know, every scene it reminds you like, hey, you're watching a slasher. Yeah. We know, you know, like we all are aware that slashers are a genre and this is what's happening to our town. It's not quite like that, but the killers, they break the fourth wall sometimes. Yeah. And it's almost like you were supposed to be the family in The Seventh Continent. In this film, you're almost supposed to be the killers because they are essentially like addressing you like, hey, you know, isn't this what you want to see? And it is kind of why a lot of people will go to see that movie. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to see some sadistic killer do something to a family. Like, and it kind of asks the question, like, why do you want to see this stuff? And like, okay, you want to see it, you're going to see it. So it's very interesting in that regard. It's not just a straight home invasion film, you know, and made in 97 too. Like it's, you know, for being that self-aware and not just a straight genre film. Like I really enjoyed it. I'm interested to see the remake now because the remake was an American remake by the same director.
Yeah.
So it's like, did he keep those connotations in? Did he have more to comment on? Like, you would think being a decade later, the original one was in 97. I think the other one's like 2007. You would think based on his filmography so far, what I've seen, he would have more to say and almost a reason for remaking it. And maybe it is commenting on remakes or, you know, the repetition of Copycat Killer. Who knows what it's about, but I'm very interested in seeing the remake now. I hope it's not an exact remake just to, you know, because maybe he needed to make a buck, you know, to finance maybe some more of his art films. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And both those films, Funny Games, I would think would, you know, fall more into the horror category. But it very much is not an all out slasher. You're not seeing a bunch of people getting killed and mowed down. It is very much has more to say. So you are spending time just hearing characters talk. But the thing I loved about it is I think better than the average home invasion film because it is not, it also discusses and kind of, it puts you in the mindset, you know, a lot of films do when people are in bad situations, like, oh, what would I do in this situation? It's not that these people break into their house. They're going on vacation, just a quick setup, and they see their friends who are also upper class because they have like a lake house. You know what I mean? Like they're playing, what is the game that they play on Heathers and maybe Jawbreakers?
Croquet?
Yeah. I think they're maybe playing that in the yard, and there's two kids with them. And the mom of the family is like, hey, you know, can you come help us launch the boat later? And the dad of the family, like, instead of saying, yeah, he like talks to one of the people. And knowing the setup of the film, you see these two boys and he's like, and it's like he's almost asking permission. Then he's like, oh, yeah. And then so the boys basically are doing that to that family. And then so you know what's coming, especially knowing the director, seeing that first film, knowing how bad things can get. I'm like, okay. Like it already ratcheted up the tension for me. So I'm glad I watched The Seventh Continent first. Really glad. So it's not about them breaking in. Basically, they get their way over there and like, hey, you know, I'm next door or whatever. First, they launch their boat, and then another kid comes and he's like, hey, I just need to borrow some eggs. And it preys on that thing of not wanting to be rude to people. Because something seems a little off, but she doesn't want to be rude because, oh, this is the neighbor's friends or whatever. And slowly these people, they start pushing further and further and pushing the boundary of, you know, then she asks them to leave and they're like, no, what's the matter? You know? And it's like, it really pushes against, I guess, you know, what you want to do to be cordial to people. And that's the scary part because it's like they knew how that family would react, you know what I mean? And not wanting to offend anybody. And that's how they like start to work their way into the family and basically get them in the position where now they're in control. And that's what I really liked about it too, because it's not home invasion where it's some random person outside breaking into your house. You know, it also has something to say about that. And I did think once kind of it gets past maybe the middle part, there was some typical genre fare that was fine. It was okay, but I was just like, okay, this is fine. It's not as engaging or as interesting as the first part, but then the last part is really good too. So yeah, I highly recommend that film as well. Knowing that it's not like going to be an all out like exciting blast, but it makes you think a lot. I'm trying to think if I watched anything else. Real quick, I watched Lawrence Kasdan, who he worked on, you know, all those Star Wars films and I think Raiders and stuff. He did this kind of noir film set in Florida. It's like from in a town that's maybe like an hour from Miami. Let me see. I cannot remember the name of the lead actor, but he was in Broadcast News. William Hurt. And Kathleen Turner is in it as well. Ted Danson's in it. Mickey Rourke. The young Mickey Rourke. Like I knew he was in the credits.
Mickey Rourke.
But then I saw this actor in the film and I was like, man, he's really good. Where did this guy go? Like did he like get killed? You know what I mean? Some
Yeah.
actors die young. I was like, he's really good. And then after the film, I realized, oh, that was Mickey Rourke. Like
Before you get into boxing. and all that
exactly, yeah.
stuff.
But he was phenomenal, and he has
Yeah.
a pretty small role, but you could just tell like this guy is a really good actor.
Yeah.
So it is aware of the noir genre, but it's not meta or anything like that. But it's very, very good if you like mysteries and that genre of film. The actors, everybody's phenomenal. The script, it's just a really, really good little mystery.
Yeah.
And it also, I think, is infamous for the way he shot the film is portraying heat in cinema, like being
Yeah.
hot, because they're in this town, and the film's called Body Heat, and it is like everything just feels sweaty and humid,
Yeah.
But super, super enjoyed that film. Like if you just want like a straight mystery genre film,
Yeah.
it's very, very awesome. That may have been on the Film Struck too as well. I can't remember, but yeah. Something else is good. This is a genre film
Yeah.
that I super enjoyed this week, but that's pretty much it. Watch some other stuff that was standard fare I've seen before.
All right. So now moving to our discussion of The Sentinel from 1977. It was directed by Michael Winner and starred Christina Raines as Allison, Ava Gardner, Chris Sarandon.
Chris Sarandon is
Then it also had Martin Balsam, John Carradine, and then, like I said, it had Burgess Meredith and different people in it that you've heard of. Christopher Walken. Oh, I forgot about Christopher Walken. He's in it.
Who was he? I'm trying to.
He was one of the detectives.
That's right. Yeah.
Jerry Orbach, who was on like the Law and Order stuff, Beverly D'Angelo. So it had a lot of people in it, and Tom Berenger has a very small role in it. And like Christopher Walken, like I was watching, I just kind of forgot that he was in it. And Jeff Goldblum, like a very young Jeff Goldblum, is in it. And it came out in 77. So in terms of like, and we'll do spoilers throughout because there's not a lot to spoil. I mean, it's a movie from 77. You can check it out. It's on Netflix. And it's on a lot of lists of like horror movies to check out.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the story, but I definitely would just watch it before getting spoiled. But also, too, there's not a lot to talk about other than the plot and how it relates to, you know what I mean? Like, I think the plot is something important to talk about with this film. Like, basically, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a home run. It's not up there with like The Exorcist or anything, but it is a fun film of that ilk from that era. If you were interested in seeing, people making religious scare movies of that era.
Because like I would say, like you said, not on the same level, but you had like The Omen, which was kind of religious themed horror. You had
Rosemary's Baby was 10 years prior.
Yeah.
And then I think The Exorcist, and then maybe The Omen possibly.
Yes, yeah, like those. I mean, in overall in the time, like not even just religious horror, just horror in general. Then you also had Don't Look Now, and this is a completely different ballpark than like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Psycho or anything like that. But you had like those types of things that came out back then. So I think this is more in that the wheelhouse of things like those movies. But it is, to me, like not like an A-tier movie.
I was reading a New York Times review of this when it came out, and they were like comparing it to a couple of those films, but they were like, they gave it a negative review, and they were like, it's tired. This started with like, or one review was like, this started with Rosemary's Baby like a decade ago.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting to watch these films now and think, oh, it's like this, and not really, I guess, maybe criticizing it too much for being dated in a certain way, because it's only a decade apart. But now it's like we saw the Blair Witch, and then all of a sudden they made a similar Blair Witch movie 10 years later. You'd be like, why did they make this film? But then 30 years from now, I'm like, oh cool, this is also like the Blair Witch. It's interesting what they did here. So it's cool to see how perspectives change on films, especially ones that maybe seem similar to other ones.
Well, and two, like I said, like we'll be discussing spoilers, but if you want to check it out, it's on Netflix. You can check it out. So I'd recommend doing that. Like, it's a movie that's worth seeing. It's just part of like its place in horror history. But like getting into the story itself, like watching the movie, a lot of it plays out with your main character Allison, and kind of like what's actually happening is she, because there's a part where she goes and like talks to and visits with neighbors that they're like, there's no one else that lives in this building. So then it's more of like, is she insane? Is she seeing things? Did this literally actually happen?
That's pretty fun at first. I like
so that
element.
and it has kind of like a zany moment. Like Beverly D'Angelo is part of like this odd lesbian couple that are like weirdly intimate in front
Outwardly,
of everybody. Especially for that time period. And it's just like the way they interact is odd. And like Burgess Meredith's character is kind of interesting and odd.
He just seemed like a quirky old man at first.
So she goes to like this kind of a really weird like dinner party thing where just everybody's kind of like trying to think of a comparison. Like if everybody was like as much of a character as Kramer was from Seinfeld, like that's everybody at this like dinner event. So
it very much reminds me of like Rosemary's Baby almost, where it seems like she's the center of attention. Like you know what I mean? Like she feels more at ease, but it just seems like something's off. You know what I mean? Like it is for her, even though it's supposed to be a cat's birthday.
Yeah, it's a cat birthday party. But then you have like Chris Randon's character is going around trying to like figure things out and
again, like Rosemary's Baby, you don't know if he's in on it.
Yeah.
If he's trying to sacrifice her or whatever.
Yeah.
So that is also, I think, maybe, I don't want to say intentional thing, but also something that draws from that where you're like, is he a bad guy or is he a good guy? Which I enjoyed that as well. They kind of kept that a secret in some regards. I mean, they did seem like outwardly like he was trying to figure out, but still you didn't know if there was going to be a twist about his final motive.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's also like the creepy blind person she sees through like in the window of the apartment. And that's the only other person that actually lives in the building.
A preacher? Yeah, it was a preacher, right?
Yeah, preacher or priest. So you have all these elements that, and you think about like the blind, like preacher, priest, nun. That's a trope that's been used a lot. Like Veronica recently had that.
Which Derek pointed out the Sentinel had two scenes very similar, which was the naked dad in the house and then the blind nun.
So you just see a lot of scenes. You see a lot of imagery repeated through horror over the years because things stick with people, like a kind of creepy, blind, white-eyed character, especially like a religious figure like a nun or a priest or whatever. That just, I guess, evokes a feeling within people more so than if it's just a regular person, because there's a lot of mythology and a lot of cultural definitions that go with those roles. And so you have like those elements, and then the movie, like something I mentioned like on the last podcast, like maybe it has a lot of famous faces but not voices. It's a movie where it seems like it's all ADR for the most part, or very heavily ADR'd. So that's just where it wasn't on-set audio capture, it was voiceover later, because the Jeff Goldblum character does not really sound like his voice. And I was like, is that Jeff Goldblum like trying to get rid of all of his vocal tics and everything? Or is that just somebody that voiced it?
Did he talk in
the Death Wish?
Death Wish, yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember if he even spoke. I mean, obviously he was kind of a central role to the catalyst of the film, but I can't remember if he spoke or not at all.
Yeah.
But, people get, thicker into their way of speaking as they get older sometimes.
And two, as you become like famous and are liked for your tics, then you kind of lean into them and don't back away from the things.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen another film like prior to The Fly of him, and he is not even, he is further removed to what you think of as the Jeff Goldblum voice. Yeah. So I think that was him, but just a young one.
But just like the point of it was, to me, it felt more kind of like those Italian productions or something like Don't Look Now, or it just felt more like that era, like that 70s ADR like era.
Yeah, which Michael Winner, the director, is from England. So, I think this was maybe an American production, but maybe he just had his way of working was like, but a lot of stuff was ADR back then. I think sometimes it was, the film was so loud, what I mean? If you're in a quiet house or something like that and you're up close or something, I don't know exactly. I don't want to pretend to go into a lot of details with that, but yeah, a lot of stuff was ADR'd back then.
Yeah, I guess too, like other things I didn't really go into, the overall idea behind the movie. So the main character, Allison, is a fashion model that moves into an apartment building that's really cheap, that's inhabited also by a blind priest. And she has flashbacks of her attempted suicide because she had attempted suicide previously. And she's fashion model, and then her boyfriend, Michael, which is the lawyer played by Chris Sarandon, is just trying to keep tabs on her and make sure she's, okay. And so it's just,
Glad you recapped that because we should have done that when we started.
Yes, you have. So basically, somebody that's attempted suicide before wants to live in their own apartment and gets a cheap apartment in New York that just so happens to only have one other inhabitant, which is a blind priest. And then when she's there, she starts experiencing weird phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So a story that is a pretty simple story at the base of it. And two, it is interesting to watch movies like this and then juxtapose it's now like how people view mental health and like attempted suicides and things. And the movie back then didn't really portray it in like an exploitative way or play it up as, this out there character. Take us more of just like somebody that's had trouble or issues. And
one thing it does exploit is the end of the film.
Well, the end of the film does have some elements that are controversial.
And I was reading some criticism of that, I believe from that era possibly. Because, I wonder people's opinions. So it's a lot of people with deformities or maybe like tumors on their face and birth defects and stuff. And they are used as basically like hell spawns in some way. Yeah. So obviously that is maybe paints people with deformities in a negative light, considering it's acting like they're
scary.
Yeah, scary. But somebody pointed out like, hey, the director who did Freaks was kind of, I think, blacklisted or whatever because of that film. But in that film from like the 30s, he made those characters sympathetic. And this, it is painting them as villains in some regard. So, so that is a very much of the era maybe mistake. And not to say I'm sure plenty of people will still make the same mistake today and probably have in lower budget productions and stuff that maybe aren't consciously aware of connotations. But it was a cheap way to get people to get something that wasn't a lot of makeup effects. You know what I mean? But it was a very weird thing and a footnote to this film that makes it more problematic, but it is what it is,
Yeah, so the basic idea, like once you get through this one, you figure out like, so you have all the elements of what's happening and what's not happening. And, is this character actually experiencing mental health issues and none of this is real? Or is it real? And it turns out that it is real. And that the blind priest is essentially like there's like a watch out or the sentinel, I guess, of the building to kind of keep evil at bay.
It's like a gateway to hell.
It's
has to be happen to be in this apartment or something.
Yeah, and the main character Allison is one that's going to take over his position as the watcher over that gateway. And then the people, like the other people in the apartment, are spirits of people who have died and are negative influences on her. Then like her boyfriend Michael, he's like investigating things and trying to figure it out, goes there and then he ends up dying because he had killed his girlfriend prior to her. So before Allison, he had killed his prior girlfriend. So when he goes to the apartment building by himself, he ends up getting killed and dying. So when she sees him there later, it's just his spirit that's kind of trapped in the house. And then, like you said,
essentially being punished for killing his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
And now he is on the side of hell.
Yeah. And then all the people at the end that have the physical deformities are essentially just like demons and they're trying to scare. And then the old priest is getting, he's old and he's running out of energy and about to pass away. Then he does pass away, and then Allison takes over his post. And that's over. So the premise is interesting. So it's
a cool setup because either, I think, are they trying to get her to kill herself too?
Yeah.
Or basically, if she dies, then she doesn't take over the post.
Yeah.
So that's the push and pull between, I guess, those wanting her to take over the post. Because doesn't the film start out with I don't know if it's at the Vatican or what, but essentially there's some meeting between some religious leaders or something. And you don't know where that's leading. Yeah. There's like a small scene. I can't even remember what it was exactly. Yeah. But so that's the push and pull where either she's going to die or, she's basically almost sentenced or set to live her life as a blind nun,
Yeah,
which is
protecting
which is
this
also
building.
not maybe the ideal existence you want to live. So either way, she is boned, which is a cool thing for the movie to do because it's either way, this is not going to end up how you would want your life to end up.
Yeah,
you know?
and too, like she was a top fashion model, and there's and there's different commercial shoots they're doing photography, and that's where Jeff Goldblum's character is because he's like a photographer. So all those elements, like, because the horror movies, you have ones that are straight scares, and there's no point really. It's just, oh, these things are scaring you, and that's the point. Is just titillation
it's a
or
funhouse
scares
film.
And this movie isn't as much of a fun house. It's more of kind of out there things happening, like the dinner party, the birthday for the cat.
Yeah.
So you have things like that, and then
It's a mystery film, like a lot of films of that era were. Really.
Yeah. I think just the thing that I would say is that watching it in a current context, the scares for a current audience, I don't think are really there. It's more of, it's entertaining to watch, but I don't think anybody's really going to come away from this scared. And there's no super iconic imagery from it.
I mean, the only thing I saw that some people they thought had pulled images from this, but like when she sees her dad running along, she like cuts him up, which looks kind of cheesy now, but it is a little gory where she cuts off his nose and stabs him and stuff. Like it looks fake, but I had heard like, I don't know if they thought Fulci stole that not stole it, but maybe was
Influenced by it.
From Zombie or whatever. But I don't know for sure, but there are some definitely striking scenes in it, but nothing that some of the scenes date the film. You know what I mean? Like where I do think Rosemary's Baby holds up. The Exorcist, I mean, doesn't maybe hold up as well as it did in the era, but it still holds up pretty well. Okay. Jaws holds up pretty well. This film goes places to where it's like, okay, this looks a little hokey now. So modern audiences would be washy on that stuff. Yeah,
so I think that like ultimately that movie, that the premise and the execution of what the story turns out to be is the most interesting part of it, is that somebody's kind of tasked with protecting a gateway to hell essentially, and that's the element that's more memorable than really anything in it. Like the famous faces in it is something that's memorable because it was Chris Sarandon before Fright Night. It was Christopher Walken before he was really the star that he became. It was was that before?
Burgess Meredith was post Batman because Batman was 66.
Yeah, no, see, that was 77. When did Rocky come out?
Oh, right around that same time, I think, right?
So Rocky...
Or was that a little before, earlier 70s?
Rocky was 76. This would have been after Rocky. So this would have been, post-Batman, post-Rocky. So he would be a relatively well-known name at the time.
He was very fun, and as soon as he popped up, I was like, "Oh, cool!" I don't know if I didn't see his name in the credits. I didn't even realize, and all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, sweet!"
It's always entertaining to see him not in a role where he's like, Batman, or Rock, you gotta,
But I really enjoyed him in this a lot, and they gave him enough screen time. You know what I mean? To where it wasn't like you just saw a peep of him like you do a few of these actors.
Because like Christopher Walken shows up, he's barely in it, doesn't really do anything, and like you even didn't remember what he was in the movie. Like the overall movie, like I said, comparing this to like The Exorcist or things like that, it's just it's a movie that's from that era that's worth checking out because of what it is. But I don't think it stands above as some benchmark movie that you have to go back and like reference for the standards in horror. It's just a movie that came out in that era that did things that even at the time reviewers are saying like, oh, this has been done before.
Yeah, it's been dated. It's kind of dated,
So it's
and I think some of them even said it was boring and not that scary.
Yeah.
In 77 or whatever.
Yeah, so it's a movie that, like I said, to me, it's light on scares because The Exorcist is one that, even though it's not I don't think to modern audiences it would be what it was when it came out. But watching it by myself at night, it still did, like, the movie itself didn't scare me, but after watching it, then it's like when you go to the bathroom in this dark house, then you're like looking a little bit more closely.
Yeah.
And
last time I watched that, I felt like there was some slower parts too.
Yeah.
And not that the Sentinel doesn't have slower parts, but there maybe is there's definitely more set pieces in the Sentinel, I think.
Well, and the Sentinel is an hour and 32 minutes. So it's not that long. So the runtime is more brisk. So it doesn't take a ton of time to do what it's doing. And two, like I said, this isn't a movie with American actors. And so it's not like one of the Italian, it's not something like Suspiria where the cast was on Suspiria. Half of them were talking English, half were talking German and other languages. It's all dubbed over. So you don't have that kind of disconnect, which in those movies works to its advantage. But this one is, more straightforward, and it doesn't have that kind of ethereal quality to it as something like Suspiria. But it definitely...
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's from some other planet that you're like watching this experience. And it's just like, okay, this is a somewhat dated 70s film from America.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a movie that... like I found there to be things in it that I, enjoyed and was entertained by, but overall, it's nothing that I came away from like, oh, because like when I had not seen it previously.
Yeah, me neither.
So I came away from it not thinking like, oh, I did myself a huge disservice by never seeing this. It's just like, oh, I just never got around to this. And the overall premise is cool, and that premise could be approached for something else.
Yeah, and I'm glad I watched it for sure. Like I'm glad Derek recommended this. It's a shame he couldn't be on it. We actually delayed it, recording it a week because he couldn't be on it, and he picked it, and then he had something else pop up. So we promised we were doing it. We've already, it's been like a week and a half or 2 weeks since we've seen the film. So that's why also we need to go ahead and do it, or else we're going to have to watch it again. But I mean, I like it. Again, not a home run. It is like a B or C tier to Rosemary's Exorcist.
Well, I guess we can go ahead and give what our scores are for the movie. So out of 10, where would this movie land for you?
I don't remember what my initial reaction, but I feel like it was probably around a 7 or so.
Yeah.
I don't think it was as high as an 8, but it is very interesting. And like I said, I love the aspect of whatever happens to her, she's basically doomed.
Yeah.
On some level,
Well, yeah,
there's a positive outcome for humanity.
Yeah.
But for her,
a fate that nobody would really want.
Yeah, it's a wash. But I also love those films. I love films that feel like the gateway to hell can be anywhere, and it is almost more intimate and small, Well,
and it's mundane, and it's just in some apartment building.
Exactly. Just like, is it Prince of Darkness, the John Carpenter film?
Yeah.
Where it is in the basement of a church or apartment building or something.
Yeah, I have that Blu-ray. I got one of the newer ones. I've watched it, but it's been a while, so I bought the Blu-ray.
Yeah, I would like to see
it.
that Blu-ray too, because it's been a long time since I've seen it, and it was on DVD or whatever. But I also love that film so much because it is about like this normal street you could be driving by, and this like battle to figure out how to close or I don't know, set aside the gateway to hell is like happening in this basement. And they even shoot like the window from the outside, like, hey, it's all happening right here.
Yeah.
I love that concept in films. So there are some elements of this film that I really like, just on a general level. And the execution was pretty well done, I thought.
Yeah. So like I would probably land on a 6. In that it's not bad, and there are some things there to check out. Like I said, to me, the concept and the story is probably more enticing than the execution of it. Just because I think like the idea, because I'm big on the idea of you have a movie that sets up some story and then there's something else going on, some kind of twist, but a twist that's not out of left field that leaves you like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
But a twist that's more of like, oh, that's really cool, and that makes a lot of this click into place and make sense. So the idea that somebody's essentially sitting on the gate to hell, the gateway to hell, and as you said too, the main character comes away with a not great ending, like a pretty terrible ending for most anybody, and that just leaves more of a feel than if it was just, oh, it's Ghost.
Yeah, or she saved the day, or you know what I mean? Like either way, that's like more memorable than a happy ending, or, a doomed ending is sometimes often you walk out of the theater or watching the movie like, oh man, that sucks for them. But also it turns off some people.
Yeah.
So this is almost like a cool middle ground, I think. And also too, if you realize it's leading to this point where it could be bad both ways, it's also like, oh, how is this going to turn out? Is there going to be a better solution for her? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
But like my thing about it too is that there's enough. Yeah. It is not. Yeah. It's a C tier movie maybe on that scale. But thankfully there's enough interesting like wacky things kind of happening throughout that it's at least keeps your interest while you're watching it to get to the end game of the film.
Yeah.
And that's what saves it, I think. I think if it was slower and more boring, it could have knocked it down to like a 4. You know what I mean? Easily.
Yeah.
It's just there's enough stuff there to keep you interested.
Yeah, because it's not like a pillar of horror that you have to watch. But at the same time, it's still better than like Halloween 5 or something like that. So
It also reminded me, I didn't mention this earlier, but a little bit of All the Colors of the Dark, I believe. I only saw that film once. I loved it. It's out of print. I think somebody may be reissuing it, but last time I looked, it was like the DVD was like $80 or $90 or something used, But in that film, I think that's an Italian film. A woman, like, she senses something weird's happening with her because she's like passing out or having these visions, like Rosemary's Baby again. This is probably post Rosemary's Baby. I'm sure. But and the film is in color, but she doesn't know what's going on, and essentially, like, there is something they want her for demonic reasons. You know what I mean? And I feel like there's an apartment with that. Like, towards the end, like, there is a struggle in an apartment and stuff. I don't know if it's a gateway to hell thing, but it also kind of reminded me of that, where there's these people conspiring against her on the outside, like Rosemary's Baby. You know what I mean? But she isn't quite. You're not quite sure what's going on or what the final goal is.
Yeah. Yeah, so that'll wrap up our discussion of the Sentinel. The next episode we'll be discussing David Fincher's Seven, the seminal serial killer film from the 90s that I think stylistically influenced a lot of things that we've seen since then, and kind of set up the David Fincher we know versus the David Fincher that was a music video director that got pushed around on Alien 3 by the studio. That'll be the next episode. If you're listening via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor, leave a review there that helps other people find the podcast.
I hear that all the time, and sometimes I don't. And I was like, oh, this one podcast. I'm like, I didn't realize how easy it was to hit 5-star in your podcast app. Like, it really is easy to scroll down and just hit or whatever star you want to give. But this one, I was like, I need to give them a review. And I go on the computer for some weird reason and review it on there. But literally, I can scroll down. I hit my 5-star review for this podcast I like a whole lot. And that was it. And it's like, do you want to comment? I'm like, no. At least did that.
Yeah. So if you're listening via like an Apple device and iTunes, it is very easy from the podcast app or whatever just to leave a review there. You don't have to actually go to the desktop. So that just helps other people like find the podcast. And if you see a podcast that has reviews, you're more likely to check it out than one that doesn't.
Yeah. Well, and also it surfaces them higher. You know what I mean? And two,
wherever their algorithms
we're getting pretty close to getting 2,000 subs on YouTube. So, if you want to give a sub, if you're not, or if you just want to give the video a like, to also bring that up if somebody's looking for the Sentinel coverage. I don't know how much is out there, but if they're looking for a Sentinel podcast, I'm guessing there's maybe not more than like 10 of those out there.
Yeah.
So if you give us some likes, it'll raise our things on YouTube if people are searching for that. And we're getting close to our subs, so let your friends know if you want. We got a shout out recently on Facebook.
Yeah.
Carlos, I think he did on Instagram too or something. Appreciate that. But that helps us out a lot.
Yeah, we always enjoy seeing people engage with the stuff we're doing, because a lot of times you throw stuff out in the world and you only ever really get negative feedback a lot. We get good comments like on YouTube.
We like
because between the listen, like the number of downloads or views to episodes, like the podcast downloads, you see the number, but you don't know, like, okay, this many people downloaded it, but who listened to it? As opposed to, like, on YouTube, the number may be a lower total number of people that viewed it than downloaded it, but people do respond more. And because a lot of times on podcast apps, you just subscribe to them and just automatically downloads it. So people might not listen to them.
Yeah, I've got plenty like that on mine.
So, just any feedback is always welcome. And we always enjoy
suggestions for films too. I meant to say that we were thinking about maybe like setting up a voting thing or something on one of them one day. Like, if we think of a few we might want to cover, like, hey, which ones should we get to first or whatever. But if you've got any suggestions, ever throw them out there. I know we get those from time to time, and usually one of us will at least watch one of the films if it got it towards us. But sometimes we just see what's easy to stream for all three of us to watch and pick one of those.
Yep, so you can follow us, or you can subscribe on YouTube. You can also follow us on Instagram at HBTVS_official. Twitter, Facebook, all those places. You can find all the links at housepavestore.com. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at William Caps.
And I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that will bring this episode of the House Pavestore podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.